Dr. Vinayan MC, Assistant Professor, School of Social Science, who will be chairing this session. Thank you, Dr. Vinayan, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you all. So, good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all of you to the last technical session of our colloquium. So, it is both a privilege and honor to preside over this technical session on memory, trauma, and narratives as part of the colloquium organized by the Narayanan Chair at the School of Social Sciences, MC University, Kottayam. The theme we are engaging with today is profoundly in our social, cultural, and historical consciousness, shaping not only individual identities but also collective histories and our broader understanding of justice and reconciliation. Memory is not just a passive record of the past, but an evolving and dynamic force that constantly interacts with the present. Trauma, on the other hand, is a deep rapture that stays in both personal and collective consciousness, often difficult to express through usual ways. Narratives, whether in form of personal testimonies, literary expressions of historical accounts, play an important role in conceiving memory at trauma. They provide a way to understand painful experiences and in some cases to heal from them. As we explore this complex relationship, it is essential to recognize that the value of interdisciplinary perspectives. Moreover, in an era dominated by digital archives, social media, and virtual storytelling, the way in which memory and trauma are recorded and disseminated are rapidly evolving. This necessitates the adoption of new methodological frameworks and ethical consideration in our research and studies. Now, we are privileged to have three distinguished scholars with us today who will share their research, providing invaluable insights into how memory and trauma manifest in historical, social, and cultural contexts. The presenters will explore a range of critical themes from intergenerational trauma and displacement to environmental transformation and cultural resistance. Our first presenter, Ms. Ashwathi Sharma, will discuss her paper titled Tracing Intergenerational Trauma and Memories, the 1942 return of Indian families from Burma. Ms. Ashwathi Sharma is scholar from Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Bangalore. Next, we have Santhosh T Kaleb, who will present his paper Silence, Water, Forgotten Leaves and Reclamation at Kuttanad, Kerala. Santhosh is a scholar who completed his research from MG University. Finally, Ms. Haritha Jain will present her thought-provoking paper Envisioning Ravana as a Protagonist, the uniqueness of Ravanothbhavam Kathakali as a form of cultural resistance. Ms. Haritha is a research scholar of School of Social Sciences, MG University, Kottayam. Without further delay, I invite Ashwathi.
Thank you so much. Hello? Thank you so much for that warm introduction. My family specifically asked me to speak slow, breathe and enunciate, and I will try to do all three without taking much time. I'll start briefly with the story of my great-grandfather, Kodwai Krishnavadya, as his name was, who went to Burma sometime in the 1920s on behest of his elder brother, who was already moved to Burma for greener pastures, as they call it. With the Japanese invasion of Burma, I'm using the word Burma to represent present-day Myanmar, him, and along with that, close to 6 lakh Indians who formed a significant percentage of Burma's population were forcibly displaced rather, to come back to India either through air, water or sea. I'm just presenting a part of my pilot study, which is tracing intergenerational trauma and memories of the return of a couple of families. All these families are Tamil-speaking families. I'm just using my insider position to gain access. I will briefly talk about the first, second and third Anglo-Burmese War of 1924, 1956 and 1824, 1856 and 1886, by which Burma was completely annexed by the colonial power, the British power, and Burma was ruled along with India by the Queen from afar. that is actually the stages at which the annexation happened, the colors, and that's the Queen's proclamation of the annexation. Again, as Indians were sent to many other colonial countries like Fiji, Malaysia, Guyana, and other African countries also. Burma, especially with the rice boom, a lot of Indians were taken in different capacities, especially to work in the rice plantations, for expansion of docks, to work in the railways, etc. A significant population of people also work in different capacities as teachers, also work in administrative offices, etc. Just some statistics about how gradually the populations of Indians rose. Interestingly, even in the 1931 census, they had a class and caste categorization of Indians, or Hindu or Hindustani as they called it. And if you can see, the largest population is of the Telugu-speaking community, which is close to 1,23,000. The next is Tamilians, who are close to 93,000. Again, briefly talking about the Japanese invasion of Southeast Asia from 1941 to 45, and how Rangoon was aerially attacked in 1941. There were three options. Close to 7,000 Indians managed to come via the air route. 4,000 Indians. Close to 4 lakh Indians had to come via the land route, which was through Chittagong, Nagaland, Assam, Ledo Pass, and then onwards to India. And there were 3 steamers which was operated by the British Asiatic Company. So people could choose to get off at Calcutta or Visakhapatnam or Madras. Not much of a choice, so to say. Most of the participants remember the rosy days in Burma where restrictions of purity and pollution were a little relaxed. It never felt like an alien land for most of the participants because there were too many Indians around. That is just a picture of one of the participants, not a participant. All the participants are dead. So this is mostly from the 2nd and 3rd generation. But that is somebody who actually worked as a staff accountant at the Standard Chartered Bank there. Okay, so most of the interviews of the 2nd and 3rd generation participants, there were common themes of hunger, separation, death, loss, and trauma. Ananta Lakshmi, that's my great-grandmother, had 12 children, and she had to make a difficult choice of having to select which of the children would come with her in the ship or the steamer, because only 5 passengers or 5 family members were allowed. She sent the eldest of her siblings through the land route, and she left 3 of her children behind, and they never made contact with them ever again. There's another family like Raman, who actually said that the father locked their entire belongings in a trunk, gave the keys of the trunk to their neighbor, along with the money and the entire house keys, hoping to go back someday, and they never went back. Interestingly, there are some fictional works based on these real events by Jerry Pinto, whose work M and the Big Boom, and Yvonne Isdani's work, which actually focuses on the Goan Christian community. Addresses the issues of loss. There is a recurrent theme of a piano being dropped into the ocean or the Bay of Bengal, and my great-grandmother, as it has been told to me and my father, she had a jute sack with whatever belongings that she had, which she was carrying with her, and a Burmese official dropped it in front of her eyes in the Indian Ocean. There were other themes of, if I may point you to Raja's mother, who, so Raja was 53 days old when his family came back in the ship. They decided to get off at the first point, which was Calcutta. The father worked for Reuters as a correspondent, and because of that reason, he was not allowed to come back immediately. And because there was no the family couldn't make contact with the father, the mother eventually adopted to living as a widow until after 14 months, when the father finally reached Kohima and was able to make a phone call and say, "Hey, I'm alive, I'll see you in Calcutta." Most of the families, as have been told, they survived on cooked rice decoction, sipping on coffee decoction for weeks. That's an interesting photo which I found, which actually has the address of the printing studio where, I'm guessing it could be close to where they stayed. That's my great grandfather Krishnavadya and his wife, and the second picture is after they came back to Pune and they settled there. So most of these stories were told to me by my father, for whom these were bedtime stories by his great grandmother. So there were stories of how the men had to take out their veshtis or lungis or whatever white cloth or fabric that they were having, and they had to wave it so that the Japanese bomber planes which were flying overhead would not bomb them, and they had to yell, "Save our soul." My great grandmother also remembers that it was she followed, I think, a different calendar, in the sense she wouldn't remember that today is a Tuesday and that it's perhaps April 2nd. I think it was a different Malayalam calendar or a Tamil calendar, but she remembers it was a full moon night because it was the moon was full. And I think I already spoke about Raman's story about how his father left all the possessions, hoping to go back someday. Yeah, I think it comes off a little late, but I really reflect with what Dr. Sanal sir was talking about in the morning about using Alessandro Cortelli's work on memory as a monument, memory as a tool, and also Hobback's work of collective memory. I mean, I'm foregrounding this research as it goes on for the next couple of years on these epistemological positions. I think this is something I thought I would discuss, but more so if it comes up a question, depending upon, I think I wrote it because as of, at this moment, my study is class and caste agnostic, and as and when I find more participants, there will be an intersection with gender and caste and class, and maybe that's when the whole idea of intersubjectivity and the inside and outsider position will delve in further and deepen and strengthen my research. So, also as a exercise, when does it stop becoming about my family, because it started with my family's personal journey, but through snowballing method I find out that it's not just my family. Even if I speak about the 6 lakh Indians who came back, that's a significant number. Within that, if I speak about the Tamil speaking families, that were 93,000 individuals. So when does it stop becoming an exercise of navel gazing and more about voicing the participants and their loss and trauma and the ephemerality or the remembrance of these events through objects and materiality and the loss of death? Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwathi. Now I invite Mr. Santhosh T Kaleb.
It's my sincere gratitude to Dr. Vinayan, Chair, and respected panel of professors, distinguished scholars. This paper titled as Silenced Waters, Forgotten Lives, Land Reclamation in Kuttanad, Kerala. Brief introduction. The reclamation of backwaters in Travancore, particularly in Kuttanad region of present-day Kerala, marks a pivotal chapter in the South Indian environmental and agrarian history. Between the early 19th and mid-20th century, a systematic conversion of Vemanad Kayal into paddy fields, Vemanad Kayal, Vemanad backwater, paddy fields transformed a region's ecological and socio-economic landscape. While existing historiography has largely framed this transformation as a triumph of entrepreneur vision or state-backed agricultural expansion. Such narratives overwhelmingly privilege the role of landowners and investors while rendering invisible labor whose physical toil made reclamation possible. This paper seeks to rectify this epistemic imbalance by recentering the discourse on the workers, the true agents of reclamation, whose labor, expertise, the endurance materially reshaped the Kuttanad terrain. This is a brief section of historical background. It's a short section. I will For better understanding, we can go through this small section. The large-scale reclamation, the transforming the tile bed. The large-scale reclamation of water bodies in Travancore gained momentum following the Royal Proclamation of 1818, with a substantial state support. Initially, reclamation efforts were concentrated along the shore of the Kyle backwaters and at river confluences. However, by the late 19th century, the focus shifted towards the offshore of the reclamation in the deeper section of the Ravana Kyle. During the 1880s, the Travancore state actively promoted this expansion of the expansion into the central backwaters as part of the broader agricultural development initiatives. Although the systematic reclamation program concluded by the mid-20th century, sporadic small-scale reclamation effort continued, with the post-independent Kerala state also contributing to such activities. I know this reclamation is related with the slavery, attached labor, but I am not going to this kind of thoughts. I am entering directly in my argument. First argument: reconsidering the reclaimers, the workers are the true agents of the reclamation. This is my first argument. The workers are the true agents of the reclamation. The existing scholarship, there are many books already there. Backwater reclamation has predominantly identified investors as the primary agents of land reclamation. This perspective equates financial investment with the physical act of reclamation, thereby marginalizing the role of the laborers whose work materially transformed the landscape. However, when examined through the conceptual lens provided by Hennard and distinction between labor and work, it becomes evident that the actual process of reclamation was driven not by the investors but by workers. Arendt, in Human Condition, difference between labor and work, the distinction that is particularly relevant to understanding the process of land reclamation. Labor consists of repeatedly the necessary activities that sustain life, such as farming and other subsistence tasks. It is marked by necessity, basically the labor related to necessity, the perpetual engagement in biological survival rather than lasting creation. This is labor. Work, by contrast, it is productive and generative. It creates durable objects and structures that shape human civilization. It is through work that the human-made world is constructed. Applying this framework to backwater reclamation, a fundamental misrecognition in existing narrative became apparent. The act of reclaiming land, constructing bund. Here I am mentioning the workers, means the workers who belong Pulaya and Prayakas mainly. The constructing bund, draining water, the preparing soil was not simply a financial endeavor, but a material transformation executed by laborers or workers. Here, workers mean the subset of the laborers. They are the real reclaimers. The workers, through their sustained toil and engagement with nature, physically brought the reclaimed land into existence. In contrast, investors, while essential for the providing financial resource and initiating projects, did not directly partake the laborious process that made reclamation a reality. Their role was administrative and financial rather than the physical and transformative. This paper, therefore, argues for the recalibration of how reclamation is understood. The workers, not the investors, were the true reclaimers. The investors may have held legal ownership over the reclaimed land, but ownership does not equate the actual act of reclamation. If we accept ardent notion of work is the act of creating something lasting, then the creation of bunds the transformation of backwaters into agricultural fields, and the reshaping the landscape where all act of the work carried out by the laborers or workers, subset of the laborers or workers. Without their efforts, reclamation would have remained an abstract financial venture rather than the tangible reality. Moreover, categorizing the investors as reclaimers obscure the exploitative nature of the process. The workers, there are many works already published in a Marxist way, Kamalas and A.V. Jose already in this way, they have done their work. The workers, despite their essential role in physically reclaiming the land, were often subjected to harsh conditions, unstable employment, and economic precarity. While the investors, who merely facilitated the process, claimed the benefits. The misattribution allied with the broader historical pattern where the laborers contribute the material transformation are rendered invisible in favor of those who control capital. Thus, reclaiming land was not merely an economic activity but the labor-intensive process that necessitated direct embodied engagement of workers with the environment. The real reclaimers were not those who financed the project, but those who brought their physical toil, transformed the landscape itself. The study therefore challenges the prevailing historiographical narrative and assert the laborers who undertook the arduous work of reclamation should be recognized as the true agents of the land reclamation in Kuttanad. This is my first point. The second argument, erasure of the labor in the historiography of Kuttanad reclamation. A critical examination of historiography of land reclamation in Kuttanad reveals glaring omission. The absence of labor narrative. Historical account predominantly celebrate the contributions of investors, the landowners. Figures such as Chalil Irrigation Panikar, Kalathil Anthony Maplay, Chiril Thoman Maplay, Thomas Murikan, Palithan Luka Mathai, while the laborers who physically executed the reclamation remain nameless. They reflect the broader epistemic injustice, where the contributions of workers are homogenized, marginalized, or entirely erased from the historical memory. The dominant historiographical discourse present in land reclamation as a story of individual entrepreneurial vision rather than the collective labor. Yet, the process was deeply labor-intensive, requiring multiple categories of workers engaged in specialized tasks. Some laborers constructed bunds, others transported. Okay, I am reading out one portion from the Pilla and Panikar. This is a classic book related to Kuttanad reclamation. It is admitted, this is a portion I am taking from that book. It is admitted all hands of that the pioneer in Ravana reclamation was one Irrigation Panikar belonging to Chalil family, one of the leading landed aristocracy in Kuttanad. He was an unusual person. They written like this: unusual person who commanded great respect and influence. His very first effort bears an eloquent testimony to his innovating genius. He proceeded to erect a barrier across the river and its mouth local material manual labor. The ring bund rising from under the water was like a dream come true. This is praising the entrepreneurship of the Chalil Irrigation Panikar. But I am skipping the main portion. I am going to the main argument, second argument. In the mornings, the epistemic erasure labors is not incidental by structural. They are reflecting the hegemony of elite dominated historical discourse. The reclamation process itself, undertaken during the summer when water levels low, was marked by the rituals and prayers, underscoring its socio-cultural embeddedness. This, and I am giving another. One of the most grueling tasks was Kathakali for the gathering clay. Underwater gathering of clay, laborers worked with the closed eyes in the underwater. You cannot see this kinds of narrative in any dominant narrative now. Across under the murky waters, relying on touch to locate the clay deposits, using wooden platform, which means vellum across bar, and transfer material canoes. This required extraordinary breath control, spatial awareness, and endurance. This expertise is absent in elite narratives. An elderly labor testimony reveals the lived reality behind this labor. This is from field work. Once in a while, when I carried clay from the lakebed to load the canoe, my head, this is underwater scene, my head hit the vellum. Sometimes my head hit the bottom of the canoe because my eyes had to be closed. The water would be murky to see anything. Moreover, we believed in spirit underwater sometimes. Underwater plants like adikala appeared like ghostly figures. This account, rich technical and cultural nuance, stand in stark contrast with sanitized histories that reduce reclamation to elite innovation. The contrast between erudite knowledge of historians like Pillai and Panikkar and subjugated knowledge labels underscore Michel Foucault critique the institutionalized power. Dominant narrative, privilege, scholarly authority, while silencing the vernacular expertise, ensuring the laborer's role remains buried beneath the layers of the selective memory. This history of Kuttanad reclamation, therefore, demands re-evaluation, one of the most beyond the glorification of investors, the landowners, to recognize the real reclaimers, the laborers who hands shaped the Kuttanad landscape but whose stories remain submerged in the silt of the forgotten histories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hari. Now I invite Ms. Haritha.
Good evening, everyone. As all are waiting to leave so fastly, so I will just finish as soon as I can. Then, my paper titled as Envisioning Ravana as a Protagonist, the Uniqueness of Ravanothbhavam Kathakali as a Form of Cultural Resistance. Before going into my arguments, I will just give a brief introduction of the development in the field of Kathakali. Kathakali, a traditional performing art form from Kerala, emerged in the 17th century as a unique synthesis of diverse performing genres, particularly folk, classical and ritual arts. Unlike Kudiyattam and Kuthu, which had its origin and development concentrated to the temple, Kathakali had its nascency and progression along with the more non-Brahmanical route. These endeavors began with the Ramanattam by Kottarakara Thampuran and Krishna Veedi by Manaveda, the Zamorin of Calicut. Kathakali had its affiliation towards the ruling class of Kerala from the time of its origin. It was the rulers of different small kingdoms who patronized and took initiatives for the innovations which culminated in the form of Kathakali as of today. Manaveda, the Zamorin of Kozhikode, wrote a series of 8 plays for Krishnanatam between 1655 and 1658. Then Kottarakara Thampuran, a governing prince of Elayadatha Swarupam in southern Kerala, composed a new cycle of 8 plays called Ramanattam, based on the Ramayana, which may have inspired by Manaveda's cycle. In this early form of Kathakali, the actor dancers vocalize their sentences. Then it comes Vettathu Raja, who introduced the lead singer named Ponnani in Kathakali performance, separating the vocal production from the acting or dancer and enabling easier abhinaya and mudras. thus contributing significantly to the Kathakali's evolution as a distinct art form. Kottayam Thambiran, a ruling prince of northern Kerala, wrote a series of 4 dramas on Mahabharata and broadened the repertoire beyond the Ramayana. And at that time, the word Kathakali gained popularity. Before that, it was usually mentioned as Ravana. Then comes Kaplinga Nambudiri. His reformative endeavors innovated the presentation of Buddhas and transformed the attire in Kathakali. During this point, the anti-heroes of Kathakali gained prominence because of the style. The emergence of Ravanothbhavam Kathakali as a paradigm shift in the history of Kathakali repertoire. Ravanothbhavam, penned by Kallekulangara Raghava Pisharadi, is based on Ramayana's last canto, that is Uttarakanda. It was the first Kathakali drama to include a haughty, anti-heroic figure as the protagonist, and it traces the origins and ascent to the power of Ravana, the anti-hero of the epic Ramayana. Ravanothbhavam was first performed at the Tripurandara Royal Palace, the seat of kings of Cochin, in the year 1780. It was during the powerful de facto rule of Shaktan Thambiran. From there, improvisations like Tabasatam were added by Kaplinga Nambudiri. I have mentioned the sources here. This study I mainly depended on article written by Mundoli Narayanan and Paula Richman about the Atakada Ravanothbhavam, and basic book was taken as KPS Menon's Kathakali Ranga. Then let's move to the findings part. Ravanothbhavam Atakada could be seen as a first move where the characters' inner thoughts and individualistic expressions were given prominence over the traditional storyline. At the same time, it was a major turn in the development of Kathakali as a modern art form, where the interpolation Tabasatam was added to a Kathakali play for the first time through the theatrical device called Nirvahana, which was usually used by the Kudiyatam performers. It was a type of cinematic flashback. Through this, the actors were empowered to use the improvisation or manodharma in a productive way. By establishing an anti-heroic figure as a protagonist, Ravanothbhavam took a central stage to the valor and pride of Ravana, which were hitherto marginalized, for highlighting the virtuous, high-caste Hindu man Rama. The strong aspirations of the people of the kingdom of Cochin at that moment, which was in the shadow of colonial subjugation, to draw parallels between the emergence of Shaktan Thambiran as a determined and fearless ruler who go to any extent in order to protect his land and power, to that of Ravana who performed penance in order to attain pride, valor and regain the respect for his mother's family. Here in this story, the text, we can see the Ravana-Rama duality. The portrayal of Ravana as a protagonist reflects the powerful alternative against the existing Rama-centered traditions. In Ramayana, Rama had gone to exile for keeping his father's pledge, whereas Ravana had performed hard penance in order to fulfill his mother's wish and to remove her sorrows. Ravana's coming to power through his mother's route, which could be a thoughtful reflection of the matrilineal system of inheritance prevailed in Kerala in the medieval and early modern period. Without portraying Ravana as the one who kidnapped another man's wife, in Ravanothbhava he is shown as the one who regained his mother's pride. So in conclusion, we can see Ravanothbhavam Atakada was a forerunner in the field of Kathakali, which played a significant role in focusing expressive identity of the characters, at the same time elevated the actors' range of improvisation and intense acting skills. It was also a pioneering attempt to use Kathakali as an art form, as an instrument of resistance against the colonial subjugation. In this way, Ravanothbhavam inspired for the restructuring of Kathakali in a more modernized way in the late 19th and early 20th century, which enhanced the aesthetics of the art form. The establishment of Kala Mandalam in the 1930s was a reflection of all these changes. India has a long legacy of cultural expressions and diversities. Colonialism tried to neglect the traditions of India which were achieved through the ages. Western education and the modern ideas created a growing quest for national identity. Modernization tried to reinstate the Indianness through the revival of different cultural art forms. It was a negotiation with colonialism. Art forms were classicized through institutionalization. The establishment of Kalamandalam was a direct reaction to the national consciousness and colonial interaction. This Kathakali text could be seen as an art form's dialogue against the colonial subjugation of the cultural sphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Haritha. So now I request Professor Rajesh, Professor Komath, and Professor Sharma to start the discussion of the Professor.
Thank you for bringing us in. This panel has been very kind to us. I also thank you and congratulate all of you for a very efficient use of time, particularly Ashwathi. I think you did the best that could be done with the pilot study and limited time. So I don't really have very much to say. Obviously, we look forward to the stage beyond the pilot study, where the real story. For Santhosh, I am not sure that it is a good idea to use RN here. Because RN's position is different. It is a very eccentric position in the sense that she is deeply critical of Marx for collapsing the distinction between labor and work. And even in RN, the distinction between labor and work only this makes sense, or rather, it does not make sense without the third term, activity, right? And the concern in that work is different. It is picking up the Greek. She is talking about the reversal of the hierarchical relationship between the vita contemplativa and the vita activa. Right? So, given all this, for the purposes you are using, RN doesn't make sense. So I think you will not lose anything by leaving out. In fact, you will lose by keeping her because of all this noise that will come in work, labor, this, that. And she is endorsing the contempt for labor that the Greeks had. And the idea of the animal laborans, that those who perform labor are animals, right? So you don't want that in your context. In fact, you are trying to do the opposite. So just give out RN. It's not helping you. For Haritha, again, this is an overview that you have provided us. For presentations, you have to think of strategy. Whether you pick up some particular episode from Ravanothbhavam, as the material that you speak on. Otherwise, see, hers was a pilot study, so she can't do very much else than what she did. But yours is presumably not a pilot study. So then you put, or perhaps you have a story to tell about some slice of the play that could be made into a presentation, right? So you should do that. And in general, although many others also did it, but since you are here now, it's a bad idea to read from the presentation. Don't read, use other words, and it is better to have less words on the presentation, on the slide, and speak more. And reading out long pieces of text from the slide is the worst of all words. Try not, it comes with practice, so try not to.
you very much, the panelists. So, I listened to all of you very carefully. I may not have many things to say, but I think the first presenter, as we were talking about intergenerational trauma and memories, as we have a lot of people working in similar areas, that kind of stuff, probably some of these are familiar to you, theorized by scholars like this notion of coolitude and all that. To talk about the coolies who have traveled from here to the Central American islands and all that, and also countries, and who work there as coolies. So some of these scholars use a notion like the coolitude, something similar, rhyming like the negritude, that. So that is what exploring, and also this is a response that I gave somebody in one of those earlier sessions. There are researches on people who have gone to Fiji and other places. So, in your case, it is the other way around. People are traveling back. So, what I am suggesting is that this concern with the objects, that things that were thrown in the sea, or the box that was locked and which was never opened. So, the kind of things that you have mentioned, they all fall within that the site of memory kind of thing. So we have historians and other particular social scientists who work in this area who had explored this kinds of things. So you may want to look at these materials for further developing this, because we have a very good case. The photographs that you have shown, and I think in the last couple of years, some of these books, the titles don't come to my mind immediately, but we have had a lot of books published on these sort of things. So I suggest that you use them very productively. So I still remember talking with one of my friends in London, Roshni Kemperu. She actually comes from the tradition of Indians, Tamils who migrated to Chilla, that area. And then that is in your story, your grandmother's story like that, the grandmother. Then she becomes an immigrant to UK, gets educated, and she's a fantastic photographer, and she actually writes about the histories of this sort of communities over there. So you get very interesting parallels in terms of, as you said, experience. But it's not one-to-one correspondence between all that happened. But some of these questions might fire our imagination as we really look at our questions. So these are the things that came to my mind. And of course, the other issues that discussed in the morning, I guess, may be of some help to you, and as you have just begun your work, and I'm sure that it is a lot of potentials there. And also think about what sort of archival materials are available on this government stuff, and also private family documents, etc. That will be of great help as you really want to look at this. Both the written materials as well as non-written sources, clothes, could be all the other kinds of objects that we have spoken about. So these are the things. And now, so Santhosh, I listened to you. So I also thought about this distinction of work and labor. I don't know, I'm not a philosophy person, but certain doubts came to my mind, because that's a very central margin of this difference. The moment you think about, I also read this particular book and all that. This distinction that they make, like biological survival, and then the other one being civilization. So I do not know where to draw the line of demarcation, because in most cases where unfree labor, for example, is involved, as in the case that you have been referring to, I'm not pretty much sure where we will draw this line of demarcation, because over here in Kuttanad case, if you look at the, you don't, probably you must have come across some statistics about the kind of stuff that they would eat, the workers. So in terms of caloric intake, how much it could be. So you may want to think about it. And the sheer survival, so that kind of things are there, when it comes to that. Then the other question you just in passing mentioned, all we have heard about the slavery and stuff like that. But if you, since you have also mentioned all this like Kamala Senan and others, you know that it was really backbreaking kind of work there. And how much was their payment in the late 19th century or even in the early 20th century? It was nothing for those who engaged in all this stuff, veterinary, those kinds of things. And how much it will come if you weigh the rice out of that veterinary or whatever, it's nothing much. So where do the even say the real physical reproduction may not have taken place in the way we want to think about it. So what you need to bring in this sort of the highly structured kind of exploitation which borders on slavery, because I don't know, here I mentioned the example of from Professor Dayanandan, who was a professor at Madras Festival. He is not a historian or economist, he was a botany professor who once said this very interesting and revealing thing. He asked us in a seminar contest, we could ever tell him which plant that was most inimical to the rice. So we couldn't give an answer. This is an example once I gave in this room, I guess. He said it was nailed barley, the rice plant. So the rice plant was, wherever rice cultivation was there, you have this labyrinthic work. So you may want to really focus on this. And if you leave out that, however you say that these people were behind reclamation, it loses its real historic power, the real experience. So something similar to that is you may want to work. Yes, so let me give back to other people.
Ashwathi, you have started, are you familiar with diaspora studies? Diaspora studies. You should really look at the diaspora studies. For migration and return migration and homelessness, etc. There is a whole lot of diaspora studies which may be of immense help to you. One of my friends, Mahapatra, who is a professor at the university, he has worked on Fiji migration. Migration to Fiji is country. Coming to Santhosh, how survival and reproduction of labor was labor. If you classify labor as reproduction, then the question is how the workers reproduce themselves. As Sandra was pointing out what they ate, how much they got money or cash or time, and whatever the daily survival mechanism, that could be incorporated into the study. Haritha, your thing, I think I agree with him. You could have focused on specific events from the Kathakali performance. Have you begun in the study or you just begun? Later, okay. Okay, go ahead. But try to focus it on a specific performance and the content of it, and in which way it was anti-colonial. You said it is anti-colonial, but I don't think that Kathakali was never anti-colonial. It was establishment of that Kalamandalam This was part of the colonial education process. It is shaped as a school, in the form of a school, which was very modern. And modernity in Kerala was, people generally say it's colonial modernity, but I would say it's a developmental modernity. It's part of the development modernity. Kathakali became a popular performing art form. Otherwise, it was confined to very elite groups in Kerala. It was never a socially popular art form at all. It was confined to these royal families and Arab families who had the tremendous development. Okay, thank you.
No, I just missed out this point of the anti-colonial stuff. You definitely need to rethink. But I would suggest that you read some standard books in modern history where people have been for last so many years talking about colonialism, etc. It should really give you stuff to rethink about the kind of ideas that you have. I think you can use them very productively to think about, and also the whole idea about the construction of the national culture, etc. People have been talking about at least since the 1980s onwards. I suggest that you really get this sort of materials to read.
Santhosh, I think we should think of the idea of originary accumulation. The old, what used to be called primitive accumulation. If you look at contemporary work on that, that could be a very useful model for you. Where accumulation by dispossession. This is a different case. It is accumulation by the appropriation of labor on a mass scale to create private property, what later becomes private property.
Into a certain process and what is talking about discussion. Okay, so this is the time to our scholars to respond against the comments raised by our Ashwathi.
Those were really valuable feedback, and I've made notes, I work on them. Just one work, that is Anchal Malhotra's Remnants of Separation, comes to mind, where she's actually documenting some objects that, this is based on the 1947 partition, where the narratives are explored through some pieces of object and artifacts in the family's work. But similar studies don't exist in this 1942 context, but I'll definitely also look into diaspora studies. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Valuable insight. I will be thinking about the work and labor. I will be thinking of it. And next, Salmash and Rajumash, I will think my focus on their wage, their how work is reproduction. I will be thinking of it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for the valuable comments. I will look into the books you suggested, and I think I will concentrate more on the content of the text, performing text, rather than looking all around. Thank you.
So thank you once again to all of you, and the special thanks to our professors. So session is over.